It started like every other Sunday. Families filled Riverside Park, strollers rolled across sidewalks, and the sound of a carousel drifted faintly in the air. Clara Bennett walked hand in hand with her son, Ethan, who begged for just a few more minutes to play. She relented. She didn't know two men were watching. They stood near the tree line, motionless, eyes fixed on Ethan. Their presence was wrong. Too still, too focused. But Clara only noticed after she glanced away to adjust her bag. And by then, it was too late. One man knelt, flashing a glittering toy car. Ethan's little feet carried him closer. In a heartbeat, hands yanked him back toward the woods. His red cap dropped to the ground. Clara's scream ripped through the air, halting the carousel, silencing laughter. But salvation was already moving. Officer Daniel Hayes and his canine partner, Kyle, were patrolling nearby. Before Clara's scream fully echoed, Kyle had caught the scent. What happened next was a race against time, teeth against fists, courage against cruelty, and at its center, a dog who proved that heroes don't always carry guns or wear badges. Sometimes they wear fur. The afternoon light poured into Riverside Park like honey, thick and golden, spilling over the tops of trees and stretching long shadows across the grass. Clara Bennett tightened the strap of her purse and glanced down at her son, Ethan, who clutched a small plastic dinosaur in one hand as if it were a passport to the world. He was 6 years old, all energy and innocence, and today he seemed particularly restless. "Can we feed the pigeons, Mama?" Ethan's voice carried that mix of hope and insistence only a child could manage. Clara smiled, brushing a loose strand of chestnut hair from her face. "We'll see if they're hungry for your dinosaur snacks." She winked, and Ethan laughed, a sound so clear it cut through the chatter of other children on the playground. Riverside Park was alive with families. Parents pushed strollers, joggers moved to the rhythm of their earbuds, and children's laughter echoed like bells. For everyone else, it was an ordinary Sunday. But for Clara, it was something more, a fragile attempt at rebuilding. Since her husband's sudden passing 18 months ago, she had carried both the weight of her grief and the fragile light of her son's happiness. She carried a camera around her neck, not the one on her phone, but an old Nikon her husband had given her years ago. Photography had once been her hobby, then her escape, and now it was her way of proving to herself that beauty still existed in the world. As Ethan darted toward a flock of pigeons, sending them scattering in a flurry of wings, she raised the camera and snapped a shot. The frame caught his small figure bathed in sunlight, the pigeons suspended mid-air, their wings like gray brushstrokes against the gold. "Got you," she whispered to herself. The boy squealed with delight, clapping his hands as the birds regrouped a few feet away. He crouched low, creeping forward as if he could sneak up on them. His small sneakers left prints in the damp earth, and his cap, a bright red one with the Yankees logo, was tilted slightly sideways on his head. To Clara, he looked like her entire world distilled into one stubborn, beautiful image. For a moment, she let herself breathe. She thought about how far they had come since those early days of grief, when Ethan had cried for his father at night, asking questions she couldn't answer. Some mornings, she would find him curled up on the couch, clutching her husband's work shirt like a blanket. Even now, there were nights when Ethan crept into her bed without a word, and she let him, pressing her lips to his hair in the dark. But today felt different. Today there was sunlight and laughter. Today, for a little while, she allowed herself to believe they were safe. Clara lifted her camera again, framing Ethan as he darted after the pigeons. Click. Another photograph. His arms outstretched like wings, his grin wide. She lowered the camera and just watched, her heart swelling in a way that hurt and healed at the same time. Around them, the park breathed with life. A group of teenagers played frisbee, their shouts blending with the distant strum of a guitarist sitting near a fountain. The scent of roasted peanuts drifted from a vendor's cart, mixing with the perfume of tulips blooming along the walkway. It was, by all appearances, a perfect afternoon. And yet, something tugged at Clara's awareness, a thread she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the way the shadows pooled longer beneath the trees, or the faint rustle of leaves when no wind seemed to blow. She shook it off, telling herself she was imagining things. Grief had taught her that fear often disguised itself as instinct. "Mom, look!" Ethan shouted. He had managed to corner a pigeon near a bench. The bird flapped wildly before taking off again, and Ethan fell backward onto the grass, laughing. Clara laughed too, lowering herself onto the bench, her camera resting in her lap. She raised her hand to shade her eyes and watched him chase joy without hesitation. She thought about the promise she'd made at her husband's graveside, that she would protect their son, no matter what, that she would give him the chance to grow up believing the world still held wonder. She had whispered it through her tears, and now she clung to it as fiercely as Ethan clung to his toy dinosaur. From where she sat, everything looked ordinary. Mothers chatting in clusters, fathers tossing footballs to their kids, the sunlight stretching lazily across the park. She wanted to believe it would last, that the afternoon would end with ice cream cones and a slow walk home. Ethan's sticky hand folded into hers. But ordinary afternoons have a way of hiding extraordinary shadows. Clara shifted her purse onto her lap and adjusted the strap of her camera. Her fingers lingered on the cool metal, grounding herself. Ethan waved at her from across the grass, cheeks flushed, chest heaving with laughter. She lifted the camera once more, catching him mid-motion, a blur of joy and innocence. As she pressed the shutter, she didn't notice two figures standing at the edge of the playground. Not yet. Her focus remained on her son, on capturing every moment of his fleeting childhood, holding it still against the pull of time. She couldn't see what was coming. The silent footsteps, the eyes watching, the quiet patience of men who did not belong in the sunlight. For now, she only saw her boy chasing pigeons, the sunlight crowning his head like a halo. And for now, that was enough. The pigeons had scattered once more, wings flashing silver in the afternoon sun, and Ethan bent to pick up his cap that had nearly slipped from his head. Clara laughed softly, raising her camera again. But this time her fingers fumbled with the strap. The worn leather had a habit of twisting itself, and she pulled it over her shoulder to adjust, her eyes briefly leaving the playground. That was when the shadows appeared. At the far edge of the sandbox, two men stood where the sunlight did not quite reach. They were not like the fathers tossing footballs or the teenagers lounging by the fountain. They carried themselves differently, too still, too deliberate. Their jackets were zipped despite the warmth, their hands buried deep in their pockets as though hiding something. One of them wore a baseball cap pulled low, shadowing his face. The other leaned casually against the fence, but his eyes were not relaxed. They scanned, restless and sharp, moving from one child to another before finally locking on Ethan. The man in the cap nudged his companion, a subtle tilt of the chin, and together they drifted closer. Their pace was slow, unhurried, as if they belonged there, as if they were just passing by. But something in the set of their shoulders betrayed them, a coiled energy waiting for the right moment. Ethan, oblivious, had dropped to his knees again, chasing a pigeon pecking at breadcrumbs near the bench. His red cap glowed like a beacon in the sunlight. The man in the cap crouched low, pulling something from his pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a small toy car, metallic paint glinting in the light. It was bright blue, with wheels that spun freely when he flicked them. He rolled it across the pavement toward Ethan. The toy clicked and clattered, catching the boy's attention instantly. Ethan froze. His wide eyes followed the car as it wobbled to a stop just inches from his sneakers. "Hey, buddy," the man said, his tone too smooth, too warm. He gave a smile that did not touch his eyes. "Cool hat you got there. You like cars?" Ethan hesitated. His mother had told him not to talk to strangers, but he was 6 years old, and the toy was bright and shiny, more real than warnings whispered at bedtime. He bent slowly, fingers hovering over the car. The man nudged it closer with a flick of his finger. "Go ahead, it's yours. Got plenty more like it." His voice was casual, but beneath it lay a tension, a hunger. From her bench, Clara tugged at the twisted strap of her camera. She muttered in frustration, lowering her gaze to untangle it. Just a few seconds. That was all it took for the world to tilt. When she glanced up again, Ethan was already stepping forward. The second man had moved closer, his shadow falling long across the grass. He stood just behind Ethan, his hands still buried in his jacket pockets, but his stance was all wrong, angled, ready. His gaze darted to Clara, checking if she noticed. She didn't. She was still fussing with the strap. Ethan picked up the toy car, turning it over in his small hands. "It's shiny," he whispered, almost to himself. The crouching man's smile widened. "Shiny and fast. You want to see more? I've got a red one in the truck right over there." He jerked his thumb subtly toward the trees beyond the playground. "Bet you'd love it." Ethan's innocence made him lean in, his curiosity bridging the distance that Clara's vigilance had left open. He took one step closer, then another. The second man shifted, readying himself. At that precise moment, Clara finally freed her camera strap. She exhaled in victory, looked up, and froze. Her son was standing just a few feet away from a stranger crouched low, a toy car gleaming between them. Her heart clenched, her pulse spiking into her throat. For a heartbeat, the scene looked almost innocent, like any adult showing kindness to a child. But then she saw the other man, tall, too close, his eyes fixed not on Ethan but on her, and she knew. The scream caught in her chest but didn't escape. Not yet. She pushed herself up from the bench, her breath faltering, her hand tightening around the camera, as though it were a weapon. "Ethan!" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. The boy turned, his small fingers tightening around the toy car. His brow furrowed, caught between the warmth of his mother's familiar voice and the lure of the stranger's soft promises. The man crouching didn't flinch. Instead, his smile turned sharper, more urgent. "It's okay, champ. Just a toy. You can keep it. Come with me. I'll show you the others." Behind him, the second man's gaze hardened, and his hand slid slowly from his pocket. The pigeons scattered again, startled by some unseen signal. Their wings beat against the air, a frantic drum roll, as if nature itself sensed the shift. Clara's heart thundered. Her scream hovered, ready to tear loose, but she was caught in the split second where everything balanced. Her son's innocence, two men's intentions, and her own desperate will to protect. The sunlight still shone. The children still laughed. But in the corner of Riverside Park, the shadows had stepped closer. It happened so fast that later Clara would struggle to remember the sequence, whether she first saw Ethan's cap tumble, or the man's hand closing around his arm, or the way the sunlight seemed to snap into shadow. 1 second, her boy was standing there, clutching the blue toy car. The next, his red Yankees cap slipped from his head, spinning in the dirt, and the crouching man surged forward. Strong fingers snatched Ethan by the wrist, yanking him off balance. The second man moved in tandem, stepping behind to block the path back to the playground. "Mom!" Ethan gasped, his voice tiny, cut off as he was pulled. Clara spun fully, the world narrowing to a single frame, her son's small body twisting against two much larger men. The sight tore something deep inside her. Her throat opened and her scream ripped out, jagged and raw, tearing through the calm afternoon like glass shattering on stone. "Ethan!" The park froze. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The laughter, the guitar strumming, the lazy chatter. Every head turned toward the sound of a mother's terror. Then, chaos. Mothers clutched their children, dragging them back from the sandbox. A toddler began wailing, his balloon slipping into the sky. Someone dropped a soda can, the hiss of carbonation loud in the stunned silence. People gasped, voices rising in panicked questions. "What's happening? Who is that?" Clara's feet stumbled forward, her camera bouncing against her chest. Her eyes locked on Ethan. His face was contorted, mouth open in a silent cry, cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. The stranger's grip tightened, hauling him backward. Ethan's small sneakers scraped the ground as he fought to resist, but he was no match. "Let him go!" Clara screamed again, her voice cracking, breaking under the weight of fear. She reached out, fingers trembling so violently she couldn't steady them. Her whole body shook, as if she were already losing him. The second man snapped his head toward her, his eyes cold, sharp as broken glass. His presence was a wall, blocking her, daring her to come closer. His hand flexed near his jacket pocket. For the briefest instant, Clara thought she saw the outline of something metallic there. Her chest tightened, her instincts shrieking danger. Ethan's cap lay abandoned on the dirt path, its bright red already smudged with dust. Clara's gaze caught on it, and something inside her shattered further. That cap had been her husband's once, the one he'd worn to ball games. After he died, Ethan claimed it, saying he wanted to wear what Daddy wore. Seeing it there, discarded, trampled, separated from the boy, was like watching a piece of her husband being ripped away, too. Her scream rose again, more guttural now, the sound of something primal breaking loose. "Help! Somebody, help!" People moved, but not quickly enough. A man tried to pull out his phone, his hands fumbling. Another woman shielded her daughter's eyes, steering her away. Fear spread through the park like wildfire. Everyone wanted to look. No one wanted to be next. Clara lunged forward, but her knees buckled. She fell to the dirt, her palms scraping raw. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and she pressed them against the earth as if to keep herself from collapsing entirely. The camera swung forward, its lens clattering against the ground, the strap digging into her shoulder. Her eyes blurred with tears. Through them, she saw Ethan thrashing, kicking at the man's shin, the toy car falling from his grasp. The blue metal clinked as it hit the pavement, rolling under the bench where moments ago pigeons had scattered. Clara's voice faltered, catching on sobs. She could barely form words, her throat shredded. "Please, he's just a child." Her hands reached forward again, shaking so hard she could barely see them. It was as though her body no longer belonged to her, just a trembling vessel of desperation. The man in the cap jerked Ethan closer to his chest, lifting him partially off the ground. Ethan's cries grew muffled, one hand reaching out toward Clara. His small fingers curled and uncurled in panic, searching for hers. She tried to move, but fear clawed at her chest, freezing her legs. For a fraction of a second, the helplessness was unbearable, like drowning while watching her son dragged away. Then, something inside her snapped. The paralysis burned into fury. She forced her body upright, stumbling forward, her voice exploding again into the park. "Somebody stop them!" Children were crying now, huddled against their mothers. An older man stood, shouting at the strangers, though he didn't approach. Every eye was on Clara, but all she could see was Ethan. His terrified face filled her entire world, every detail seared into her soul. The way his mouth quivered, the streak of dirt on his cheek, the light fading from his wide eyes. The sound of her scream seemed to hang in the air even after her breath broke. It reverberated through Riverside Park, across the playground, across every heart that heard it. A mother's scream, the kind that doesn't just ask for help, but commands it, demands it, because her child is the line she will not allow the world to cross. But in that suspended moment, it felt like no one would come. No one but her. Clara's vision tunneled. She saw her son's cap on the dirt. She saw her husband's shadow in Ethan's terrified eyes. She felt the weight of the promise she had made at the graveside. I will protect him. Always. Her trembling hands curled into fists. She screamed once more, the sound raw, unbroken, filling the air with the unfiltered terror of a mother watching her child torn from her grasp. And somewhere beyond the playground, past the trees and benches, the scream carried farther, carried to the ears of someone who would answer. Someone not human, but no less a guardian. Kael's ears pricked before even Daniel Hayes heard it. The hum of the engine was the only sound inside the patrol SUV as it rolled slowly along Riverside Drive. Officer Daniel Hayes sat behind the wheel, one hand resting loosely at 12 o'clock, his other arm draped across the open window. The late afternoon sun washed the dashboard in a warm glow, catching the faint silver at his temples. At 36, Daniel looked older than his years, not from lines of age, but from shadows that settled in men who had seen too much. Beside him, in the passenger seat where no human partner had ever lasted, sat Kael. The German shepherd's ears stood alert, his amber eyes scanning the world beyond the glass. His breathing was steady, measured, like the rhythm of a soldier waiting for orders. To the casual passerby, it might have looked like nothing more than a cop driving with his K9. But for Daniel, Kael wasn't just a partner. He was the one constant that kept the ghosts of war and widowhood from swallowing him whole. Daniel flicked a glance at him, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're quieter than most rookies I've been paired with," he murmured. Kael turned his head, meeting his gaze for a moment, then blinked slowly, as if unimpressed. That was Kael's way, calm, steady, patient. But Daniel had seen what lived beneath that quiet exterior. He'd seen Kael move like lightning, muscles coiled when danger demanded it. He'd seen those same amber eyes fix on a suspect with unshakable focus until surrender was the only option. He reached down, absently scratching the space behind Kael's ear. The dog leaned into the touch, then returned to his vigil, nose twitching as the car passed a hot dog stand on the corner. It wasn't supposed to be a remarkable shift. Sundays rarely were. Families at the park, teenagers sneaking beers by the riverbank, an occasional call about noise complaints or a lost wallet. Daniel welcomed the quiet. His life had been built on storms, combat tours overseas, late nights watching the cancer consume his wife, the hollow silence that followed. The stillness of patrol was, in its own way, a gift. Still, he never let his guard down. Habit and training had wired vigilance into his bones. He scanned mirrors, noted clusters of people, tracked the rhythm of the city like a man who could sense when a song was about to sour. Beside him, Kael shifted, his body pressing lightly against the seat. Daniel didn't need words to understand. He glanced around the block they were passing. A group of boys skateboarding, a woman tugging a toddler along too fast, a homeless man curled under a newspaper. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Kael had noticed something. He always did. "Relax," Daniel said softly. "If it's important, you'll let me know." Kael's ears flicked once, then he lowered his head onto his paws, though his gaze never wavered from the window. Their bond hadn't come easily. Daniel remembered the first day he met Kael at the K9 unit. Rumors swirled that the shepherd was too sharp, too volatile, a dog that wouldn't bond. They said he'd already been cycled through 2 handlers. Daniel had looked into those eyes and seen something else, not volatility, but history. A dog carrying scars invisible to everyone but him. It was familiar. It was him. Their first months had been rocky. Kyle testing boundaries, Daniel pushing back with patience and steadiness instead of force. The breakthrough had come during a winter night when Kyle tracked a missing girl through 6 blocks of snow and darkness, refusing to quit even when his paws bled. When they found her shivering behind a dumpster, Daniel knew. This wasn't just a dog. This was a soldier in another form. Since then, they had been inseparable. Daniel eased the SUV to a stop at a light, resting his elbow on the window frame. The city stretched before them, ordinary and unpredictable all at once. He glanced at Kyle again, lowering his voice. "You know, if it wasn't for you, I don't think I'd still be wearing this badge." Kyle's ears twitched, as if acknowledging the confession. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Don't let it go to your head." A bicyclist zipped past, and Kyle's eyes tracked him briefly before shifting back to the road ahead. The light changed. Daniel pressed on. The hum of the SUV returned, steady as a heartbeat. For a time it was almost peaceful, the city alive with its routines. Daniel at the wheel, Kyle on silent watch, an ordinary patrol. But Daniel knew from experience. Wars didn't announce themselves. Neither did disasters. They came in the middle of afternoons that looked like this. They crept into ordinary hours and split them open. He didn't know it yet, but in just minutes, a mother's scream would cut through this calm, and everything would change. And when it did, Kyle would already be listening. The patrol SUV rolled steadily along the park's perimeter road, its tires crunching over scattered gravel. Daniel Hayes was mid-thought, mentally cataloging a grocery list for later, debating whether to finally buy Ethan Carter's kid a baseball glove like he'd promised. The kind of small-town errand that kept him tethered to normal life. Then Kyle moved. It wasn't dramatic. Not a bark or a lunge. Just the sudden lift of his head, ears snapping upright like twin antennae catching something only he could hear. His muscles stiffened, his amber eyes narrowing toward the line of trees, where sunlight fractured into shade. Daniel glanced at him. "What is it?" Kyle didn't answer, but he didn't need to. His nose lifted, nostrils flaring, chest expanding as he pulled the air in deep. Then he froze. A low rumble began in his throat. So quiet, it was almost inaudible beneath the hum of the engine. And then, faint at first, Daniel heard it too. A scream. It came thin and distant, carried on the wind like something torn from the earth itself. Not a startled shriek from a child on a swing. Not the playful squeal of tag. This sound was different, raw, jagged. A mother's voice cracked wide open. Daniel braked hard, the SUV jerking to a stop at the curb, his pulse hammered instantly, instincts kicking in. Kyle was already moving, body pressed against the door, nose shoved high into the narrow slit of the window. He whined, then barked once, sharp and urgent, eyes boring into the tree line. Daniel's gut clenched. "Show me," he whispered. He killed the engine, jumped out, boots hitting pavement. Kyle leapt down a heartbeat later, landing light, tail stiff as a rod. He lowered his head, nostrils twitching. Then Daniel saw it too, lying on the edge of the path, half buried in dirt, a flash of red. A child's baseball cap. His chest tightened. He didn't need confirmation. He'd been in this work long enough to know what a dropped shoe or cap meant. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Track," he ordered, unclipping Kyle's leash. Kyle didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, nose pressed low to the earth, sucking in the scent of the fabric. His body stiffened, then jerked sharply left toward the winding path that cut through the trees. He pulled like a magnet drawn to its charge, the leash snapping tight between them. Daniel's heart pounded as he stumbled into stride behind him, his hand already brushing the holster at his hip. The scream came again, closer now, though muffled by distance and foliage. It spurred Kyle on, claws digging into the dirt path as if he could outrun the very wind carrying that cry. "Easy, boy," Daniel muttered, though he didn't mean to slow down. He meant to stay alive. They pounded deeper into the trail. The park sounds, the chatter, the laughter, faded behind them, swallowed by the thick hush of trees. All Daniel could hear was his own ragged breath, the thump of boots, and the relentless rhythm of Kyle's stride. In flashes, memory intruded. Another scream, years ago, in Afghanistan. A child in the rubble of a bombed-out village. Daniel remembered the way he'd run then, too, weapon drawn, too late to stop what had already happened. He shook it off, jaw tightening. Not this time. Kyle skidded suddenly, nose plunging into the dirt where a tiny sneaker print was pressed into soft soil. A child's footprint, unmistakable, running, dragged. Daniel's throat closed. He crouched briefly, fingers brushing the impression, then rose, eyes darkening. "Good boy," he breathed. "Find him." Kale surged forward, nose to ground, tail rigid with focus. His bark tore through the trees once, sharp, commanding, an announcement to anyone ahead. "We are coming." Daniel's hand settled fully on his pistol now. He ran harder, following the line of his partner's body as Kyle darted left, then right, zigzagging like a needle, threading invisible stitches. The trail was clear to him even when it wasn't to Daniel. A discarded shoe, scuff marks in the dirt. Branches bent where bodies had forced their way through. Then another sound cut through, the muffled cry of a child. Daniel's lungs seized. "Ethan," he whispered, though he didn't yet know the boy's name. He only knew the voice of fear, the voice of the innocent. Kale barked again, louder this time, deep from his chest. It was not a warning. It was a promise. Daniel unclipped the leash fully, letting it fall. "Go!" The shepherd exploded forward, a blur of muscle and fur, vanishing through the underbrush. Daniel sprinted after him, heart hammering, sweat slicking his palms. Every second mattered. Every step was a battle against the memory of arriving too late. The wind carried another scream, closer, panicked, desperate. Daniel's legs burned as he pushed harder, lungs screaming for air. His mind locked onto a single thought. Hold on. Just hold on. Ahead, Kyle's bark cracked the silence again, sharper, more urgent. It was followed by a human shout, angry, startled. Daniel's pulse spiked. His partner had found them. Kyle's body shot forward like an arrow loosed from a bow. His paws pounded the dirt, each stride a drumbeat in the silence of the woods. Dust rose behind him in faint clouds, disturbed leaves spiraling into the air as he carved a path deeper into the trees. His nose stayed low, locked onto the invisible trail of scent. The rhythm of his heartbeat fused to the trail of fear left behind by a 6-year-old boy. Daniel Hayes sprinted after him, breath tearing in and out of his lungs. His boots struck the ground with steady violence, matching Kyle's tempo as best as human legs could manage. The leash dangled uselessly at his side, swaying like a discarded tether. Ahead of him, the shepherd was no longer a calm companion on patrol. He was a predator on mission, every muscle taut with focus. The scream echoed again, faint but sharper now, tugging Daniel forward with a force stronger than gravity. His chest clenched. Every second mattered. He had learned that long ago on battlefields and back alleys alike. Seconds were the difference between rescue and regret, between life and a funeral. Behind them came another sound. Clara's sobs, her feet stumbling on the uneven trail. She was chasing too. desperation stronger than fear, her voice ragged as it broke through the trees. "Ethan!" Her call cracked in the air, her throat raw, each syllable trembling with terror. Daniel glanced back once, enough to see her clutching her purse against her body as she ran, tears streaking her face. She was slower, weaker, but relentless. He knew he couldn't stop her. He wouldn't. She was a mother, chasing the only thing she couldn't afford to lose. "Stay close," Daniel shouted, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Don't stop running." Her reply was a choked sob, but she pushed forward, driven by something deeper than endurance. The trail narrowed, branches whipping at their faces. Daniel lifted his arm to shield his eyes, forcing his way through. His lungs burned, but adrenaline shoved the pain aside. Kyle's barks shattered the air ahead of him, sharp and insistent, pulling him onward. The rhythm of pursuit was brutal. Kyle's claws tearing earth, Daniel's boots striking hard, Clara's uneven steps and sobs trailing behind. The sounds wove together into a relentless score. Urgency, desperation, hope clawing against the dark. Daniel's mind fractured into flashes of memory as he ran. Another chase, years ago. A child's scream in another place. The sound of gunfire. The smell of burning sand. He remembered arriving too late, holding a body too small to carry scars. That failure had never left him. It drove every step now. Not again. Not this boy. Not while Kyle was leading. He forced his breath steady. "Kyle! Find him!" As if he needed the reminder, Kyle surged harder, the cords of muscle in his legs propelling him like a bullet. His tail was rigid, his ears cutting the air. He darted left at a fork in the trail without hesitation, yanking Daniel into the brush. Daniel's shoulder struck a branch, pain lancing through him, but he didn't break stride. Somewhere ahead, men shouted. The words were indistinct, but the tone was harsh, angry. One barked an order, another cursed. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He unholstered his pistol mid-stride, the metal heavy and familiar in his hand. His finger rested along the frame, ready, controlled. Kyle's bark thundered again, so loud it shook the branches. It wasn't just a bark, it was a warning, a battle cry. "I'm here. I've found you." Daniel pushed harder, lungs screaming, thighs burning. Clara's cries faded further behind, but her voice still carried, thin, breaking, begging. "Ethan, hold on, baby!" Leaves whipped across Daniel's face as Kyle broke into a clearing. Daniel burst out a second later, boots skidding on loose dirt. His eyes locked immediately on the scene ahead, a battered pickup truck, its back door yanked open, two men, one shoving Ethan toward the vehicle, the boy's limbs flailing wildly. Kyle did not hesitate. With a guttural snarl, the shepherd launched himself into the air, a blur of fur and fury. His jaws locked onto the arm of the man gripping Ethan, teeth sinking through cloth into flesh. The man roared, staggering back as Kyle's weight dragged him off balance. Daniel's pistol came up in the same instant, his stance steady despite his heaving chest. "Police!" His voice cracked like thunder, echoing through the clearing. "Drop him! Now!" The second man spun, eyes wide, one hand flying toward his waistband. Daniel's weapon tracked him instantly, finger tightening on the trigger. Behind him, Clara stumbled into the clearing, nearly falling as she screamed her son's name. Her voice was so raw it tore through Daniel's focus, cutting deeper than any battle cry. Ethan's small form crumpled against the truck's bumper, his capless head jerking up at the sound of his mother's voice. His lips formed a word. "Mama," though no sound carried. The clearing exploded with noise. Kyle's snarls, the suspect's curses, Clara's sobs, Daniel's barked orders. The air smelled of sweat, dirt, and fear, and under it all was the pounding of Daniel's heart, steady, unrelenting, as he kept moving forward. Every step closer to the boy, every breath pulling him out of memory and into this moment. Because this time, he swore, they would not be too late. The world had changed in a heartbeat. One moment, Ethan had been chasing pigeons, laughing as their wings fluttered around him. The next, rough hands had clamped around his arms and yanked him off his feet. Now the forest closed in on him, swallowing the light, the laughter, the safety of his mother's presence. His small body jerked and twisted in the grip of the stranger, but every kick, every struggle was useless. The man's arm was iron around his chest, squeezing until Ethan could barely breathe. His legs dangled, sneakers scraping uselessly against the ground. "Stop squirming," the man hissed in his ear. His breath was hot and sour, filling Ethan's nose until he gagged. "You'll make this harder on yourself." Tears spilled down Ethan's cheeks, streaking through the dirt that already clung there. His throat ached from screaming, but he screamed again anyway, because what else could he do? His voice cracked, high and desperate. "Mama!" The forest ate his cry, swallowing it into the tangle of trees. Somewhere behind him, he thought he heard her voice answering, faint and broken, but the sound was too far, too fragile. His chest heaved with sobs. The second man, taller, with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, walked just ahead of them. He glanced back, his eyes cold, then muttered, "Truck's ready. Don't waste time. Someone's gonna hear." The man carrying Ethan grunted, adjusting his grip. "He's smaller than I thought. Easy money." They moved fast, weaving through the narrow trail. Branches whipped at Ethan's face, scratching his skin, snagging his shirt. His cap was gone. His toy car was gone. Everything familiar had slipped from him in seconds, and now he was trapped in the arms of a stranger whose heartbeat thudded against his back like a war drum. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, wishing hard, like he sometimes did at night when he whispered to the stars, that if he prayed enough, his dad would come back. But his dad was gone, and Mama was too far away. The men's voices grew sharper, clipped with urgency. "Get the kid in the truck, and we're gone. No witnesses." "What about the woman?" "She saw us. She'll be too busy screaming to follow." The words cut through Ethan, though he didn't understand all of them. He only knew truck and gone and witnesses. He only knew they were talking about Mama. He kicked harder, the sound of his sneakers thumping against the man's shin. "Put me down," he cried, voice shrill. "I want my mom." The man cursed, tightening his grip, until Ethan wheezed. "Shut it, kid." The scarred one turned, eyes narrowing. "Keep him quiet. If he draws attention, we're finished." The man holding Ethan pressed a hand over his mouth. The smell of leather and dirt filled Ethan's nose, suffocating him. His sobs turned to muffled gasps, his tears wetting the man's palm. The forest blurred past, trunks of trees, patches of shadow, slivers of sky overhead. Ethan's chest hurt, his lungs burned. The edges of his vision flickered. He felt so small, so powerless, caught in arms that didn't care if he cried or begged. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something pushed him to fight harder. His father had always told him, "If you're ever scared, don't give up. Yell. Kick. Bite if you have to." So Ethan bit. Hard. His teeth sank into the man's hand. The taste of sweat and iron filled his mouth. The man howled in pain, jerking his hand away. Ethan screamed again, his voice breaking but fierce. "Mama, help me!" The scarred man spun, eyes blazing. "Shut him up." but the sound had already torn into the air, echoing beyond the trees. Ethan didn't know it yet, but another set of ears had heard him, ears sharper than any human's, tuned to distress, to danger. Kale was coming. Still, the boy's terror was unrelenting. The man's hand clamped back over his mouth, harder this time, and Ethan's cries were smothered into whimpers. His body jerked as he tried to twist away, but he was pinned, helpless. His tears smeared into the man's sleeve, leaving small, wet stains no one else would notice. They broke into a clearing, and there it was. The truck. Old, dented, paint peeling at the edges. Its back door hung open like a gaping mouth, waiting to swallow him whole. The scarred man glanced around, scanning the trees. "Quick, get him in. We've got 5 minutes, maybe less." The man carrying Ethan shoved him forward. Ethan's sneakers scraped against the truck's bumper as they tried to lift him inside. His hands flailed, reaching for anything, anyone. His tiny fingernails caught on the rough metal edge, scratching uselessly. "Mama," he sobbed into the man's palm. "Mama, please." The words were muffled, but they lived in his eyes, wide, wet, brimming with the fear of a child who knew the world could vanish in an instant. The men grunted, struggling with his thrashing body. "Hold him still." "I'm trying. He's stronger than he looks." Ethan's chest heaved, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. The shadows of the truck loomed larger, darker. His small body trembled with exhaustion, his limbs weakening. He thought of his mother's face, her smile that morning, the way she had promised ice cream after the park. He wanted that moment back. He wanted her arms. Instead, he was trapped in the grip of strangers, their voices hissing above him, their plans unfolding like a net tightening around his life. "The truck's ready," the scarred one repeated, his tone edged with impatience. "No more delays. Get him in, now." And with that, the last shred of sunlight seemed to vanish from the clearing. The forest floor was alive with scent, invisible threads woven through dirt, leaves, and bark. For Daniel Hayes, it was chaos, a tangle of smells he could never sort. But for Cale, it was a map. The German shepherd pressed his nose low, pulling in the air in sharp bursts. His nostrils flared, chest heaving as he sifted each trace. The sweet rot of fallen pine needles, the musk of squirrels darting up branches, the faint tang of rusted metal from a nearby trash can. Beneath it all, one smell cut through. Sweat and fear, sharp and fresh, laced with the faint, powdery scent of a child's skin. Ethan. Cale growled low, a sound that vibrated through the leash like a current. His ears twitched, swiveling independently, catching every distant rustle. His tail stiffened, his body coiled like a bowstring. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, nearly yanking Daniel off his feet. "Cale." "Easy," Daniel grunted, stumbling before regaining balance. But he didn't restrain him. He knew better. When Cale pulled like this, it meant he was locked on. They tore down the trail, dirt spraying behind their strides. The boy's scream had already told Daniel time was short, but Cale didn't need screams. He had the scent, the trail, the certainty burned into every nerve. Daniel's eyes darted to the ground as they ran. There, a child's sneaker print pressed into soft earth, smaller than his palm. Next to it, the heavier tread of boots, drag marks in the dirt. Confirmation. His gut twisted. Cale barked once, sharp and guttural, then dipped low again. His body remembered. And in the rush of the chase, so did Daniel. He had seen Cale like this before, not here in the green hush of Riverside Park, but years ago, under a burning Afghan sun. He remembered the village road, lined with mud brick walls, the scent of dust and sweat thick in the air. They'd been hunting an IED buried near a school. The soldiers had looked to their shepherd, young then, but already fierce. Cale had done the same thing, nose to ground, pulling with such force Daniel's predecessor could barely hold the leash. The dog had stopped suddenly, pawing at the earth, teeth bared in frustration. They dug where he marked, and there it was, enough explosives to level half the village. Lives saved because Cale's body knew what men could not see. That memory flashed like lightning as Daniel sprinted now, Cale dragging him into the present. The shepherd's instincts were the same. Different battlefield, same war. "Find him, Cale," Daniel urged, his voice rough, carrying on shallow breaths. "Don't stop." Cale didn't need encouragement. His chest pumped like a bellows, his pads pounding the earth with relentless rhythm. His ears twitched left. Footsteps. Then forward again, branches cracking. His muscles tightened, his speed surged. He barked once more, loud and defiant, announcing himself to the forest. "I'm coming." The leash burned in Daniel's grip, his knuckles white. He let Cale lead, forcing his own body to keep pace. His lungs screamed, his heart thundered, but his eyes never left the shepherd's back. Those shoulders rippling, that tail rigid, the certainty in his every move. Behind them, Clara's sobs wove faintly through the trees. She was still chasing, still calling her son's name, though her voice was breaking apart. Daniel wanted to yell back, to promise her they'd find him, but there was no breath to spare, and Cale's urgency allowed no pause. The trail dipped, the soil damp and rich. Cale skidded slightly, nose pressing into a patch of trampled earth. He snorted, pawing once, then lunged right, veering off the path entirely. Daniel followed without hesitation, shoving through a thicket of branches that clawed at his arms. His uniform snagged, thorns tearing fabric, but he pushed harder. Then he heard it, the faint, muffled sob of a child. Not imagination, not memory, real. Cale's ears twitched back at the sound, then pinned forward. His growl deepened, vibrating like thunder in his chest. His entire body shook with urgency, with fury. The leash snapped taut, and Daniel released it. "Go!" Cale vanished into the brush like a shadow unleashed. His bark cracked the air again, so sharp it sent birds scattering from the canopy. Daniel's pistol was already in his hand, breath ragged, eyes scanning for movement. Through the trees, he caught a glimpse. A boy's small figure, dirt-streaked and thrashing in a man's arms. The scarred man, ahead, barked an order. "Truck's ready! Hurry up!" And the one holding Ethan cursed, stumbling as the child bit down on his hand. Cale exploded into the clearing. His snarl tore the air apart. For an instant, time folded. Daniel saw not just his dog, but the soldier he had once been. Afghanistan, the schoolyard, the scent of gunpowder and blood, and Cale, the same fury, the same certainty, his body remembering the mission, even if the battlefield had changed. Daniel's chest ached as he sprinted forward. He had trusted Cale with his life before. Now he was trusting him with a child. The shepherd's teeth flashed white in the sun as he hurled himself at the man's arm, jaws closing like a vice. The sound of impact was sickening, a scream erupting from the man's throat. Ethan slipped from his grasp, crumpling against the truck's bumper, wide-eyed and gasping. Daniel's weapon leveled, his voice booming. "Police! Drop him!" But beneath the order, beneath the adrenaline, a single thought pulsed steady as Cale's heartbeat. This time, we're in time. The brush parted with a sudden violence. Khal's body burst through first, a streak of muscle and fury, his low snarl tearing the quiet apart. His amber eyes locked on the sight ahead, a battered truck with its back door yawning open, and beside it, a boy being shoved like cargo. Ethan's small body slammed into the metal bumper, his cry sharp and broken. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, his little hands clawing at the air for something, someone. His legs kicked wildly, sneakers scraping against the truck's rusted edge. The man holding him cursed, jerking Ethan's wrist so hard the boy yelped in pain. "Get in," he snarled, trying to force him inside. But Khal was already airborne. With a roar that was more animal than dog, the shepherd launched himself across the clearing. His jaws clamped down on the attacker's arm with the full force of his body, teeth sinking through fabric and flesh. The sound was a wet, tearing crunch, followed by the man's scream, a ragged, guttural noise that split the clearing. Ethan dropped to the ground, crumpling beside the bumper. His small chest heaved with sobs as he scrambled backward on his hands, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. For a heartbeat, he froze, staring at the dog who had come from nowhere, who had saved him. The second man reacted instantly, spinning toward the sound. His hand darted into his jacket, fingers curling around the handle of a knife. His eyes were hard, wild, filled with the desperation of someone caught too soon. And then Daniel Hayes was there. He crashed through the tree line, boots skidding on loose dirt, pistol already drawn. His stance was automatic. Feet planted, arms extended, weapon leveled on the threat. His voice cut through the chaos, booming with authority. "Police! Drop it! Now!" The clearing erupted into noise. Khal snarled savagely, his body shaking with the force of his grip as he tore into the man's arm. The attacker thrashed, blood spilling, his free hand pounding uselessly against Khal's ribs. The shepherd didn't yield an inch. Ethan sobbed, curling against the truck's tire, his tiny hands pressed to his ears as if he could block out the violence around him. His wide eyes darted between the dog, the man with the knife, and the stranger with the gun, who had suddenly appeared. "Get him off me!" the man under Khal screamed, his voice hoarse with agony. The scarred man stepped forward, knife flashing in the sunlight. His gaze flicked between Khal and Daniel, weighing the odds. His lips curled into a snarl of his own. "Let the kid go, and maybe we walk." Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. His voice was steel. "That boy doesn't leave this clearing. Put the knife down." But the scarred man didn't move. The knife hovered, trembling slightly in his grip. His eyes flicked toward Ethan, toward the boy pressed against the truck's wheel. A calculation, a threat. Daniel's pulse slammed in his ears. Every nerve screamed to act, but his training locked him in control. One wrong move could end in blood. Ethan's blood. "Don't," Daniel warned, his voice dropping low, deadly. "You won't get out alive." Khal snarled louder, his teeth sinking deeper. The man beneath him shrieked again, writhing in the dirt, blood darkening his sleeve. The shepherd shifted his weight, jaws like iron, refusing to let go. Ethan whimpered, his small voice barely audible through the din. "Mama." The word tore through Daniel like a blade. He glanced at the boy, saw the tremble in his small frame, the tears streaking his cheeks. For a flash, he saw another child, another place, another war, and the memory almost crushed him. Not again. "Khal, hold!" Daniel barked, voice sharp, commanding. The dog obeyed instantly, muscles locked, grip steady, his eyes burning as they fixed on the writhing attacker. The scarred man took one step closer, knife gleaming. Daniel's weapon tracked him smoothly, following his every move. His voice thundered again. "Drop it!" Silence stretched, tight as a wire. The only sounds were Ethan's sobs, the attacker's screams under Kale, and the ragged breath of men on the edge of violence. Then, somewhere behind them, a new sound broke through. The crashing of branches, a voice choked with terror. "Ethan!" Clara burst into the clearing, stumbling, her eyes wild, her face wet with tears. She saw her boy crumpled against the truck, and the scream that ripped from her throat shattered everything. The scarred man's head snapped toward her, and for the briefest instant, his focus shifted. It was all Daniel needed. "Don't move!" Daniel roared, pistol steady, body locked. His eyes burned, his voice carrying the weight of every failure he refused to repeat. "It's over." "Drop the knife," Kyle growled again, deep and resonant, his teeth clamped with unrelenting pressure. The man beneath him went limp with shock, sobbing in pain. The scarred man's chest heaved, his knuckles white around the blade. His eyes flicked from Daniel's gun to Clara's tear-streaked face, to Ethan's trembling form. And in that standoff, the clearing felt like a battlefield, seconds stretching into eternity, every heartbeat loud enough to drown the world. Chaos had erupted. But the outcome was about to be written. Branches whipped against her arms as Clara forced her way through the undergrowth, lungs burning, legs trembling beneath her. She hardly felt the scratches blooming across her skin, hardly noticed the sting of thorns tearing at her jeans. Every breath she drew was ragged, ripped from her chest, fueled by terror. "Ethan!" Her voice cracked, raw and broken, splintering into the trees. The sound carried her desperation, each syllable tearing through the forest like an open wound. And then she saw him. The clearing opened suddenly, and there was her son, crumpled beside the truck's bumper, cheeks streaked with dirt and tears, his small arms reaching out as if the very sight of her was salvation. "Mama!" Ethan's cry broke, his voice trembling, soaked with terror. His little body shook as he reached for her, fingers clawing the air between them. Clara stumbled forward, the sight of him stealing her breath, breaking her heart and piecing it back together all at once. For a fleeting second, the world narrowed to that single image. Her boy alive, her boy calling for her. But the moment was shattered by movement. The man Kyle had pinned screamed in agony, thrashing beneath the shepherd's crushing grip, blood darkening his sleeve. The second man, the one with the scar, snapped his head toward Clara, his eyes narrowing, calculating. His hand moved fast, diving into his jacket. When it came out, the glint of steel caught the sunlight. A knife. Clara froze, her chest seizing. The scream that had filled her throat turned into a strangled gasp. Her legs wavered beneath her, but she forced herself forward anyway, toward Ethan. Nothing mattered but reaching him. The scarred man lifted the knife, his knuckles white around the handle, his posture sharp with panic. "Stay back!" he barked, voice shaking with rage. "Stay where you are, or I'll—" Daniel Hayes stepped between them before the words could finish. His pistol was already leveled, his stance steady despite the chaos around him. His voice cracked through the clearing like thunder. "Drop it!" The command froze the air. For a heartbeat, the clearing balanced on the edge of a blade. Ethan's sobs filled the silence, small, broken sounds that sliced into Clara's chest. She inched forward, her body trembling, her arms outstretched. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. Mama's right here." Her words cracked, each one pulled from a heart that had been split open. The scarred man's chest heaved, eyes darting between Daniel's gun, Kyle's snarling form, and Clara's desperate figure. His breathing was ragged, wild, his lips curling into a twisted sneer. The knife trembled in his grip. Kyle growled deep, his teeth still locked in the flesh of the other man's arm. The sound was low, guttural, vibrating through the earth like a promise of violence should anyone move closer to the boy. The pinned man screamed again, kicking helplessly against the dirt. His voice was thick with pain. "Get him off. Do something," Ethan whimpered, pressing himself tighter against the truck's wheel. His small body curled in on itself. His eyes, wet and wide, never left his mother's face. He reached again, tiny fingers desperate for her hand. Clara's knees threatened to give way beneath her. She could see the knife, gleaming, so close to where her son lay trembling. Every instinct in her screamed to rush forward, to throw herself between them, to gather Ethan into her arms and never let go. But the weapon froze her, fear anchoring her feet even as her heart begged her to move. Daniel's voice thundered again, sharp, commanding, "Put it down, now!" His pistol didn't waver, his eyes locked on the scarred man with a predator's focus. The scarred man hissed, his gaze flicking to Clara. "You take one more step, and—" Clara's breath broke. Her voice, cracked but fierce, burst into the clearing. "Please, please don't hurt him. Take me, not him." The words hung in the air, desperate and trembling, the plea of a mother with nothing left to bargain but herself. Ethan sobbed harder, his little voice shaking. "No, Mama, don't." The scarred man's grip tightened on the knife. His body trembled with the chaos of the moment, cornered, desperate, wild. Kael's growl deepened, his amber eyes burning, his muscles quivering with restraint. He wanted to lunge, to finish it, but he waited, held by Daniel's command, by the tension so sharp it could snap at any second. Daniel's finger rested against the trigger, his chest heaving. He had been here before, in the sand, in alleys, in moments where one man's choice decided whether a child lived or died. His voice dropped lower, steadier, cutting through the noise with a deadly calm. "You don't walk out of here with that knife. Drop it, or I swear to God, you won't take another breath." Clara's hands shook violently, her tears blurring her vision. All she could see was her boy, his small hand reaching for her, the knife glinting too close, Daniel's pistol fixed, Kael's snarl vibrating through the ground. Her heart pounded so hard it drowned the sounds of the forest. Her breath caught in her throat. Her body trembled, caught between hope and horror. And in that terrible, fragile instant, she knew. The next second could decide everything. The scarred man's chest heaved, the knife trembling in his fist. For one long, breathless second, the clearing balanced on the edge of his blade. Daniel Hayes kept his weapon leveled, his stance locked, eyes burning into the man's. The soundscape was chaos. Kael's guttural growls, the pinned man's screams, Ethan's sobs, Clara's ragged cries. Then the scarred man lunged. Daniel moved instantly, training and instinct fusing into a single motion. He dropped his weight, sidestepped, and slammed his forearm into the attacker's wrist. The knife clattered against the truck's side, metal shrieking as it bounced to the ground. The man snarled, recovering fast, throwing a wild punch. Daniel blocked with his forearm, then countered, driving his fist into the man's ribs with a crunch that sent him staggering back. But desperation gave the scarred man strength. He lunged again, grappling with Daniel, their bodies colliding with the force of men who knew survival depended on winning this moment. Daniel's pistol flew from his hand, skidding into the dirt. Suddenly it was no longer a standoff. It was a brutal scuffle, raw and close. Clara screamed. Her legs moved before her mind could stop them, carrying her forward toward the fight. "Daniel, my son, please." Her voice cracked, filled with desperation and terror. Daniel caught her movement out of the corner of his eye, even as he wrestled with the man. "Stay back," he roared, his voice cutting like a whip. "Clara, stay with Ethan. Don't move." But her body shook with the urge to run into the storm, to drag Ethan away herself. She clutched at her chest, torn between obeying and throwing herself into danger. Her sobs ripped through the clearing, echoing off the trees. Meanwhile, Kael refused to yield. The man pinned beneath him had started to fight back, his free hand pounding against Kael's ribs. He landed a strike, hard, against the shepherd's side. Kael let out a short, sharp yelp, but his jaws never unclamped. His teeth dug deeper, the growl vibrating through his entire frame. Blood sprayed in hot streaks across his muzzle, but his focus never wavered. He was locked in, and nothing, pain, fists, or fear, could break his grip. Daniel grunted, muscles straining as he wrestled the scarred man against the truck. The man slammed his elbow into Daniel's shoulder, the impact jolting down his arm. Pain shot through him, but he clenched his jaw, driving his knee upward into the man's stomach. The attacker doubled over with a strangled gasp. Daniel seized the moment. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until bone and tendon screamed. With a savage motion, he slammed the arm against the truck's frame. The man howled, his body crumpling as Daniel ripped him away from the vehicle and hurled him to the dirt. The knife glinted nearby, half buried in soil. Daniel's eyes flicked to it, but the man rolled, scrambling toward it with a snarl. Daniel dove after him, slamming his shoulder into the man's back, sending both crashing into the ground. "Clara, stay back," Daniel shouted again, his voice hoarse, desperate, as he grappled with the man inches from the knife. Clara fell to her knees beside Ethan, her trembling arms wrapping around her boy. She pressed his face to her chest, sobbing into his hair, whispering prayers she barely understood. Ethan clung to her, his small hands shaking, his voice muffled. "Mama, I'm scared." "I've got you," she whispered, tears streaking down her face. "I've got you, baby. Hold on." Kael snarled louder, his jaws tearing deeper into the pinned man's arm. The attacker's screams rose, high-pitched, animalistic. In his desperation, he drove his fist into Kael's side again and again. Each blow thudded hard, jolting through Kael's ribs. The shepherd's body shuddered with pain, but he didn't let go. His eyes burned with a soldier's focus, with memory and instinct that told him he had one mission: hold. Daniel's world narrowed to the fight beneath him. The scarred man bucked violently, twisting with the kind of desperation that came from knowing capture was worse than death. His fingers brushed the knife handle, closing around it. "No, you don't." Daniel's voice was a snarl. He slammed his palm against the man's wrist, grinding bone against earth, prying his fingers open one by one. The knife slipped loose, falling just out of reach. The man roared, jerking upward, his forehead cracking against Daniel's jaw. Pain exploded across Daniel's skull, stars flashing in his vision. For a heartbeat he staggered, the world tilting. Then he remembered the boy, the scream, Clara's broken voice, Kael's growl. He couldn't fail here. With a guttural shout, Daniel drove his elbow into the man's temple. The scarred man went slack for a split second. Enough. Daniel rolled, pinning him face first into the dirt, wrenching his arms behind his back. The man cursed, thrashing, but Daniel's grip was iron. "Don't move," Daniel growled, his chest heaving. "It's over." The clearing was chaos still. Kael's unrelenting growls, the pinned man's agonized screams, Clara's sobs, Ethan's muffled cries, but something had shifted. The momentum was theirs. Daniel forced the scarred man's face deeper into the dirt, his own body trembling with adrenaline. He looked up, sweat and blood stinging his eyes, and saw Clara clutching Ethan like he was her last breath of air. He saw Kael, battered but unyielding, holding the second man as if he were the weight of every battle Kael had ever fought. And Daniel knew They weren't finished yet. But they weren't losing. Not this time. The fight ended, not with a final blow, but with a collapse. The scarred man writhed once more beneath Daniel's grip, then went still, his breath ragged and shallow, his face pressed into the dirt, his wrists locked painfully behind him, Daniel's knee grinding into his back. His curses had faded into groans, the fight bleeding out of him as surely as the blood seeping from his split lip. Kyle still held the other one. His jaws were locked tight around the man's arm, muscles trembling from exertion. Blood streaked his muzzle, staining his teeth crimson. The attacker's voice was a high, keening wail, half agony, half panic. He pounded weakly at Kyle's ribs, but the shepherd's snarl rose louder, vibrating through the clearing like thunder. His eyes burned, his tail stiff, his whole body a wall between the child and the danger. And then, finally, there was Ethan. He had been curled against the truck's tire, frozen by terror, his small frame shivering uncontrollably. But when Clara reached him, when her arms wrapped around his trembling body, he gave in. His strength broke like a dam bursting. He collapsed against her chest, sobbing into her shirt, clutching at her as if she were the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. "Mama!" His voice cracked, high-pitched, broken. "Mama, don't let them take me." "I won't," Clara whispered, her own sobs shaking her whole body. She pressed her face into his hair, kissing him again and again, her tears dampening the dirt and sweat already clinging to him. "I've got you, baby. You're safe. You're safe now." She rocked him in her arms as though he were a newborn again, as though cradling him tightly could undo the last 30 minutes of horror. Her hands trembled as they cupped his face, her thumbs brushing the tear tracks away even as new ones spilled. Ethan clung harder, his small fists gripping her shirt with desperate strength. His words spilled in broken gasps. I thought I'd never see you again." "Oh, sweetheart," Clara's voice cracked. "I'll never let you go. Never." Kyle shifted then, his stance low and protective, planting himself between mother and child, and the men still writhing on the ground. His chest heaved, every exhale a growl. His teeth, glistening with blood, bared in a warning that needed no words. "Come closer, and you won't leave this clearing alive." Daniel snapped his cuffs around the scarred man's wrists with a brutal click. The man groaned, jerking once before going limp against the earth. Daniel shoved him flat, breathing hard, sweat streaking his temples. With his free hand, he reached for his radio, pressing the button hard. "Dispatch. This is Officer Hayes. 2 suspects in custody. Repeat, 2 in custody. Child safe. Need backup and medical now. We're in the north clearing off Riverside. Move fast." Static answered, then a calm but urgent voice. "Copy that. Units en route. EMS notified." In the distance, faint but growing, the first notes of sirens began to cut through the forest air. The sound was thin, fragile at first, then steadier, closer. Hope carried on the wind. Daniel exhaled, chest heaving as adrenaline slowly drained. He looked to Clara, saw her cradling Ethan, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her whole body trembling but unbroken. He swallowed hard, the image burning into him. "You're safe now," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Ethan, to Clara, or to himself. Clara's eyes met his for just a heartbeat. They were wide, shimmering with tears, but filled with something else too, a gratitude so fierce it hurt. Her lips trembled. She couldn't form words, so she just nodded, clutching Ethan tighter. Kyle growled again, shaking the man beneath him until he whimpered. Daniel moved closer, crouching by his partner's side. Kyle, release. The command was steady, practiced, but Kyle didn't obey immediately. His body trembled with fury, with the instinct to protect. His teeth were still buried in flesh, blood dripping onto the ground. For a moment, Daniel thought he might not let go. Kyle. His voice softened, dropping lower, steady and sure. It's over. He's done. You did your job. Slowly, Kyle's jaws unclamped. His lips pulled back from the torn flesh one last time before he released, stepping back with a final growl. His muzzle was streaked with red, his eyes burning. He padded immediately toward Clara and Ethan, planting himself at their side. His chest pressed against Clara's leg as if to say, "I'll guard them now. Nothing will touch them again." Ethan's small hand, trembling, reached out from his mother's embrace. He touched Kyle's fur with hesitant fingers, pressing into the thick coat, feeling the steady warmth beneath. The boy's sobs softened just a fraction. He whispered hoarsely, voice muffled against Clara's chest. "Good dog." Clara broke into fresh tears at the sound. She kissed the top of Ethan's head, clutching him tighter. Daniel finished cuffing the second man, yanking his arms behind him with a brutal efficiency. The attacker whimpered, his face pale with blood loss, his body limp against the dirt. Daniel gave the cuffs a sharp tug, making sure they held. The sirens drew closer, louder now, winding through the streets toward the park. Daniel rose to his feet, scanning the tree line, every sense still sharp. But the worst was over. For the first time since the scream tore through Riverside Park, there was space to breathe. The clearing was still a scene of violence. Blood smeared on Kyle's muzzle, groans from the cuffed men, Clara's sobs trembling in the air. But woven through it was something stronger. Survival. Ethan was alive. And as Daniel looked at Kyle, standing firm between mother and child, and the danger behind them, he knew this wasn't just a rescue. It was a miracle forged from instinct, courage, and the unyielding bond between man, dog, and the people they swore to protect. The sirens were still distant, only a thin echo threading through the trees. But Clara didn't hear them. The world had shrunk to the trembling body in her arms. Her son. She clutched Ethan so tightly he could barely breathe. Arms locked as if loosening them might let him vanish again. Her fingers dug into his small back, terror still coursing through her veins. "Mama, you're squishing me," Ethan whispered, voice muffled against her shirt. Yet even as he said it, his arms tightened around her neck, burying his face, as if he wanted to disappear inside her. Clara's tears fell into his hair. She kissed him again and again, whispering through sobs, "I've got you, baby. Never again. Never." Each kiss was a prayer, each word a vow. Ethan trembled, hiccuping sobs shaking his body. He couldn't speak, so he just held on, fists clutching her shirt. Clara rocked him gently, despite her own trembling. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe with me." Kyle moved then. The German shepherd's chest heaved with ragged pants, his muzzle streaked with blood. He padded closer, each step deliberate, eyes scanning before settling on Ethan. Without a sound, he lowered his head to the boy's shoulder, a gesture soft and reverent. Ethan froze, then lifted one trembling hand from Clara's shirt and laid it on Kyle's head. His fingers threaded through the thick fur. "Good dog," he whispered, voice weak but filled with awe. Kyle exhaled a low whine, pressing closer. He did not wag his tail or move with excitement. He simply stayed, still, steady, as if to say, "I will not move. I will not let anything near you again." Clara's tears doubled. "He saved you. He saved us both." Ethan sniffled, nodding, I thought they'd take me away. I thought I'd never see you again." "Not while I'm breathing," Clara said fiercely, then softened, her voice cracking. "You're my whole world, Ethan." Daniel Hayes stood nearby, chest heaving, sweat dripping as he finished cuffing the men. He didn't speak. He simply watched. The mother and child locked together, the shepherd standing guard. The sirens grew louder, but the moment felt suspended outside of time, a fragile pause between chaos and aftermath. Clara breathed in her son's scent, pressed her lips to his hair, and let herself finally break. Sobs of gratitude now, not terror. "Mama, don't let go," Ethan whispered. "Never, baby." She kissed his forehead, hands cupping his cheeks. Kyle leaned into Ethan's hand, still tangled in his fur. His eyes softened, the ferocity fading into gentleness. He rested his muzzle against the boy's shoulder, breath sinking with Ethan's shaky exhales. In that clearing, they were more than survivors. They were a family bound by terror, rescue, and loyalty. But then came another sound. Murmurs, gasps, footsteps. Park visitors filtered in, parents gripping children's hands, teenagers craning for a better view. Phones lifted. At the center sat Clara, still on her knees clutching Ethan, Cale at her side like a blood-streaked sentinel. The clearing hushed. Only Ethan's sobs broke the silence. Then, slowly, he reached again for Cale, his hand brushing through the shepherd's fur. Cale lowered his head gently into the boy's lap. Applause erupted. First one man, then the crowd. Mothers crying, fathers holding children close, teenagers cheering. It was not applause for spectacle, but for a miracle. Ethan blinked up, cheeks wet, and whispered, "Good dog." He pressed his face into Kale's fur. The shepherd leaned closer, steady as stone. Phones filmed, voices murmured. That dog saved him. Thank God they were here. Daniel, still sweating, raised his radio. "Dispatch, suspects secured, child located, unharmed, requesting EMS for minor injuries, possible shock." His tone was calm, professional, but his shaking arms betrayed the storm beneath. "Stay back," he barked when someone edged too close. The crowd obeyed, instinctively recognizing the sacredness of the moment. Clara lifted her head to meet Daniel's gaze. Dirt streaked her face, lips trembling, but her eyes burned with gratitude. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." Daniel nodded, then turned to the men groaning in cuffs. Kyle's low growl kept them pinned better than chains. Gasps rippled when Ethan leaned forward and pressed a kiss to Kyle's blood-streaked fur. The crowd wept, phones catching the image from every angle. Daniel forced his voice steady as he added, "K9 engaged one suspect. Medical attention required. K9 is stable." He looked at Kyle, chest heaving, muzzle bloody, body trembling, and felt reverence. This dog hadn't just tracked. He had fought. He had saved. Police lights flickered through the trees. Doors slammed. Orders barked. Radios crackled. Officers hauled the suspects away. Daniel shoved one forward, his strength brooking no resistance. The men were silent now, their danger locked behind car doors with metallic finality. Through it all, Kyle trotted beside Daniel, steady as a soldier who had fulfilled his mission. On the edge of the clearing, Clara still held Ethan in her lap, eyes following every movement. Each slammed car door was another thread of the nightmare cut away. Ethan raised a small hand, curling it into a wave. "Bye-bye, doggy," he whispered, hoarse but calm. Kyle's ears twitched. He turned, amber eyes softening, then trotted closer, tail giving one slow sweep. The crowd erupted again, applause rolling like a benediction. Parents clutched their children tighter, some lowering their phones at last, realizing this was more than footage. Clara bent her head, whispering into Ethan's hair, "Thank you." Her eyes lifted, finding Daniel first, then Kyle. "Thank you," she said again, her voice breaking. Kyle stood tall, blood and dirt streaking his fur, eyes calm, protective. He didn't need to move closer. His presence was enough. Officers pushed the crowd back, guiding families away. The spell lingered in hushed voices and tearful glances. The story would travel faster than squad cars, through mouths, through phones, through the city itself. But here, in the clearing, it still belonged to those who had lived it. Daniel gave final confirmation on his radio. 2 suspects en route. K9 secure. Victim with mother. Uninjured. His hands shook as he lowered the device, clenching them into fists. Clara rose slowly, Ethan against her hip. She stood near Kale. Ethan reached once more, brushing through the shepherd's fur. Kale leaned into the touch, lowering his head against the boy's shoulder. Clara's tears fell again. "We owe you everything." Daniel looked at them, mother, child, dog. Relief pressed heavy in his chest. It wasn't victory he felt, but something sharper. Survival. He turned away, afraid the cracks inside him might show. The squad cars pulled out, lights flashing. The danger was gone. The nightmare was over. What lingered was not the sight of suspects driven away, but Ethan's trembling wave, Kale's steady stride, and Clara's whispered "thank you," breaking like glass in the air. The precinct smelled of burnt coffee and stale air, scents that usually meant routine, not aftermath. Tonight, they carried only weight. Daniel Hayes leaned against the wall of the briefing room, arms crossed tight. The long table was scattered with papers, photos, and a half-empty evidence bag. Down the hall, the kidnappers cursed in their cells, voices muffled, but still clinging to Daniel's skin. Detective Alvarez slapped a folder open. This wasn't 2 idiots acting alone. Notes in the van, lists, names, drop-off points, organized. Detective Morales tapped a bag holding a crumpled notepad. Ransom drafts, Clara Bennett's pension, her job. They picked their target carefully. Someone did their homework. Daniel's jaw clenched. He saw Clara's tear-streaked face, Ethan clutching Kale's fur. All of it, nearly destroyed for money. Alvarez flipped another page. Other names match. Same handwriting. At least 3 other families. "This is a ring." Daniel stepped forward, scanning the jagged scroll. Dollar amounts, timetables, drop-off points near highways. At the top of one page, no mistakes this time. His stomach turned. He remembered another girl, another ransom gone wrong. He had carried her weight ever since. Not again. "These men weren't working alone," he said, "which means Clara and Ethan aren't out of danger yet." The room went still. Alvarez nodded grimly. "We'll dig into every connection. Phones, banks, associates." Daniel's eyes dropped to Kael, lying by the door, chest rising with slow exhaustion. His muzzle was clean now, but the faint stain of blood lingered like a shadow. Each footstep in the hall snapped his eyes open again, sharp, watchful. Daniel crouched, hand resting on the dog's neck. "You did good," he murmured. Kael pressed into the touch, exhaling softly. Morales cleared his throat. "We'll need Clara's statement. She's still in the family room." "Think she's ready?" Daniel thought of Clara whispering thank you through her sobs. Ready? No, but she wouldn't refuse. She'll do it, because she knows it's the only way to stop them. Alvarez asked, "You'll be with her?" Daniel nodded. He wouldn't let her walk into another room of strangers without someone who understood. The family room was small and beige, its flickering lights trying too hard to soothe. Clara sat hunched in a plastic chair, Ethan in her lap, her arms locked around him, as if the short walk from the park hadn't eased her fear. He clung to her shirt, breath coming in hiccups, eyes darting at every sound in the hall. Kyle lay curled on the floor beside them, chest still heavy, his muzzle damp. He had been washed, but nothing could scrub away the aura he carried. Violence spent, loyalty fulfilled. Ethan's gaze landed on him. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he reached out. His hand brushed the shepherd's coat. Cale didn't move. He only exhaled, pressing his head closer, amber eyes softening. "I'm here. You're safe." Clara held her breath. She hadn't gotten more than sobs from her son since the park. But now, under Kale's quiet presence, something shifted. Ethan's fingers stroked again. His breathing steadied. His lips parted. In a whisper so faint it was almost lost. "The man with the scar. He hurt me." Clara tensed, arms tightening, tears spilling anew. "It's okay, baby. You don't have to." But Ethan went on, voice shaking yet insistent. "He grabbed me. His hand. Here." He touched his wrist, showing the bruise. He said, "The truck's ready." Daniel stepped closer, crouching low so he didn't tower. "You did good, Ethan. That helps a lot." "The man with the scar. You saw him?" Ethan nodded, tears sliding. He looked at me, like I wasn't a kid. Like I was just something. Clara kissed his hair fiercely. "You're not something. You're my everything." Detective Alvarez slipped in with a notepad. "You're sure he said, 'Truck's ready'?" Ethan nodded, still gripping Cale's fur. He said, "Don't waste time. Someone's gonna hear." Alvarez scribbled fast, then met Daniel's gaze. "That confirms it. The scarred one wasn't the leader." Clara's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Daniel inhaled. "It means there's someone else. A third man. The one giving orders." Clara's face drained. She pulled Ethan closer, her voice breaking. "You're saying it's not over?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not yet." Ethan pressed his face into Cale's neck, muffling a sob. The shepherd didn't move. He simply stayed, breathing slow, his heartbeat steady against the boy's trembling frame. His eyes lifted to Daniel's, passing along the vow. Neither needed to speak. Alvarez closed his notebook. "We'll put out an alert. Every officer in the city will have his description by sunrise." But Clara's eyes didn't soften. She knew too well promises didn't always stop men like that. Fear lingered longer than sirens. Daniel crouched closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. Kyle and I. We won't let him near you again. Not ever. You're safe here tonight." Clara blinked through tears, her lips trembling. She wanted to believe. She looked down at Ethan, stroking Kyle's fur as if it were the only thing anchoring him, then nodded faintly. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracked but fierce. Daniel's hand pressed to Cale's back, feeling the slow rise and fall. His eyes lingered on the boy, bruises darkening his wrist, fear too old for such young eyes. He clenched his jaw. He had failed before, years ago. Not this time. Not with Cale. Clara rocked Ethan gently, whispering, "You're safe. Mama's here." The words meant as much for herself as for him. His fingers never left Kyle's fur, even as exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. Through the door's glass, detectives spoke urgently. "Third suspect, still at large, bigger than just the two. Clara's heart lurched. Her cocoon of safety unraveled. She clutched Ethan tighter, eyes darting to the door as if danger could walk through at any moment. "There's still someone out there?" Daniel turned sharply. Guilt flickered in his eyes. He crouched to meet hers. "No," she demanded. "Tell me the truth. Is it over?" He didn't sugarcoat. "No, not yet." The words cracked something inside her. Tears spilled again. "Oh God, they'll come back. He's still in danger." Daniel's hand rested firm on her shoulder. "Clara, look at me." She did, eyes swimming. His voice was low, carrying the weight of a vow. "Cale and I won't let them near your boy again. Not now. Not ever." Cale lifted his head, amber eyes steady, pressing his body more firmly against them. Clara's voice broke. "How can you promise that?" "Because it's who we are," Daniel said. "You saw it yourself. Cale will put himself between Ethan and danger every time. So will I." Clara searched his eyes for doubt. She found none. Cale pressed his head into Ethan's side, warm breath steady. The boy's fingers tightened in his fur, even in sleep. Clara bent her head, whispering into Ethan's hair. "You're safe. They won't touch you again." Her voice cracked, but this time it carried conviction. Not because the danger was gone, but because Daniel's vow and Kyle's presence gave her a shield to hold on to. Daniel sat back, jaw tight. Outside, detectives traded plans and warrants. But in this room, there was fragile stillness. Mother, child, and dog bound together in survival. He knew the threat was real. But as he watched Cale lower his head protectively into Ethan's lap, Daniel felt a grim certainty settle inside him. They wouldn't get past Cale. They wouldn't get past him. Not this time. The news did not come as a knock or a statement. It came as a whisper, carried through the precinct air until it reached Daniel Hayes. Alvarez said it aloud, flat and hard. The third man wasn't in charge. Their leader slipped the net. He's gone. The words hit harder than a fist. Daniel's exhaustion snapped into alertness. A man like that didn't vanish in retreat. He regrouped. He planned. He waited. The file lay open. A grainy mugshot, eyes cold and predatory, charges stacked high, assault, extortion, confinement. Beneath it, a red scrawl. Consider extremely dangerous. Daniel closed the folder slowly, but the image burned into his mind. Down the hall, Clara overheard. She had stepped out to ask for water, but the words carried, "Escaped. Violent history. Not finished." Her body froze. The cup fell from her hand, rolling silently on the carpet. Her pulse spiked, breath locked in her throat. The walls of the station seemed to close in. She backed into the family room, her son's name trembling on her lips. Inside, Ethan sat curled on the couch, Kyle at his side like a living shield. His small hand tangled in the shepherd's fur, tethering him to calm. When Clara re-entered, his eyes caught the storm in her face. "Mama?" She forced a smile, but it cracked at the edges. She gathered him into her arms. He clung tighter, pressing against her chest, as though he feared she might vanish if he let go. That night they were moved to a safe house under police watch. Locks checked twice, officers stationed outside. Yet safety felt paper-thin. Clara sat upright in bed, lamp still on, Ethan curled against her side. His thumb rested against his mouth, a habit he hadn't shown in years. His other hand clutched Kyle's fur, refusing to release even in half-sleep. Clara stroked his hair, whispering lullabies she hadn't sung since thunderstorms frightened him as a toddler. Her voice cracked, but she sang anyway, for him, for herself. Every creak made her flinch. Every shuffle of boots outside set her heart racing. She stared at the locked door, knowing logic said safe, yet fear whispered otherwise. Kael shifted from the bed to the door, stretching across the threshold like a barricade. His eyes glowed faintly in lamplight, ears twitching at each sound. He breathed slow, steady, but his muscles never relaxed. Every few minutes he lifted his head, sniffing the air, listening, guarding, always guarding. Clara's tears spilled silently. She reached down, brushing her fingers through his fur. The shepherd pressed into her touch before resettling, gaze fixed on the door. "Don't let him go," she whispered to him, raw. Ethan stirred, blinking drowsily. "Mama?" She kissed his forehead quickly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." "I don't want to sleep unless you stay awake," he whispered back. Her chest tightened. She smoothed his hair. "I'll stay awake." "I'll be right here." His breathing steadied again, his hand still tangled in Kyle's coat. Clara sat awake through the night, whispering promises into his hair. Promises tomorrow would be brighter, that she would never let him slip away again. Her voice shook, but Kyle's presence at the door and Daniel's vow at the precinct anchored her. Outside, Daniel sat in his SUV at the curb, 20 hours awake, but his focus never wavered. He scanned the street, sipping lukewarm coffee, eyes always returning to the second-floor window where a lamp glowed. He could see Clara's shadow rocking Ethan. Kyle's silhouette stretched across the doorway. The sight steadied him. Inside, Clara eased Ethan onto the couch, covering him with a blanket. She moved to the kitchen, hands trembling as she poured water. Her reflection startled her. Hollow eyes, disheveled hair, fear etched into her face. She barely recognized herself. Her gaze drifted to the door, to Kyle. He hadn't moved except to adjust his weight. His ears flicked at faint creaks. His posture was patient, certain. Watching him stirred gratitude so fierce it hurt. She sank to her knees beside him, laying a hand in his fur. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. "You saved him. For those seconds in the park when I couldn't see him." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to live in a world where he doesn't exist." Kyle didn't move. He stayed warm and steady. She clutched his coat as though he were the only anchor left. Behind her, Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly, reaching toward the couch where Kyle's tail stretched. The shepherd's ear flicked, acknowledging even that unconscious touch. Clara pressed a trembling kiss to her fingers and laid them on Kyle's head. "Don't let him go," she whispered again, almost a prayer. Through the walls, Daniel's SUV creaked faintly. Knowing he was out there steadied her almost as much as Kyle inside. Together, they were a shield. Soldier on the street, shepherd at the door. The night stretched heavy. Silence pressed down like weight. Then Kyle's ears twitched. His head lifted, amber eyes narrowing at the door. A low vibration rolled from his chest, deepening into a growl. Clara froze mid-stroke of Ethan's hair. Her breath caught. "Kyle?" He didn't look at her. His gaze locked on the door. Fur bristling, he rose, muscles coiled, silent pause carrying him forward until he stood squarely between the threshold and the couch. Clara's chest tightened. She pulled Ethan closer, arms wrapping him protectively. He stirred, but did not wake. Outside, Daniel fought fatigue in his SUV. Halfway through a sip of coffee, the muffled growl carried faintly through the night. His pulse sharpened. He set the cup down, eyes narrowing on the stairwell. A flicker of movement shifted in shadow. Too still, too deliberate. Daniel slipped out silently, boots finding quiet spots of pavement. He approached low, steady. By the time he reached the stairwell, the figure was gone. Only silence remained. The railing creaked faintly in the night breeze, as if someone had leaned there seconds before. On the ground, scuff marks, ash scattered, a cigarette stub still glowing faintly. Daniel crouched, jaw tightening. Whoever it was hadn't been passing through. They had been watching, waiting. He rose, scanning rooftops, alleys, every shadow. The street was quiet again, deceptively so. He keyed his radio low. Unit 12 Hayes. Possible surveillance near target's building. Evidence of recent presence. Requesting additional patrol. Static. Then Alvarez's sharp reply. Copy. Units inbound. Hold position. Daniel exhaled, eyes flicking back to the lit window upstairs. He could see Clara's shadow bent over Ethan, Kyle's outline pressed against the doorframe. The sight hardened his resolve. Inside, Clara whispered frantically into Ethan's hair. It's okay, baby. I've got you. Kyle's growl tapered, but his posture remained rigid, unyielding. Moments later, Daniel entered softly with his spare key. Clara's eyes snapped to him, wide with fear. What was it? She demanded. Daniel's voice was hard. Someone was here. Stairwell, cigarette still burning. They were watching. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, a sob breaking. She clutched Ethan, whispering, "Oh God, it's him, the one who got away." Daniel didn't answer. Silence was enough. Her tears spilled faster. I can't live like this, waiting for him to come back. What if he... Daniel knelt in front of her, hand firm on her arm. Listen to me. He's not getting through. Not past me. Not past Kyle. His voice was steel, eyes steady, carrying a vow heavier than reassurance. Kyle turned his head toward him, amber eyes echoing the promise. His body pressed against the frame, immovable. Clara swallowed hard, trembling, then whispered to Kyle, "Please don't leave us." The shepherd lowered himself slowly, resting across the doorway, head on his paws, gaze still fixed on the dark. His posture said everything. I'm not moving. Daniel rose, sweeping the room with his eyes one last time. The leader of the ring was out there still, watching, waiting. The battle in the park had been only the beginning. The hunt wasn't finished. The precinct briefing room was heavy with the weight of risk. Maps covered the table, red circles marking Clara Bennett's apartment, the park, and half a dozen escape routes. Radios crackled, laptops glowed, and every officer leaned in close. Detective Alvarez tapped his marker. He's watching her. He doesn't trust his men anymore. If she moves, he'll come himself. That's our chance. Daniel Hayes stood at the far end, arms crossed, jaw tight. The plan felt like walking a knife's edge, but Alvarez was right. The scarred leader was obsessed. He wouldn't stop. So we use her as bait, Alvarez finished. A short walk on her usual route. Officers hidden everywhere. Hayes, you and Kale's shadow close. We let him show himself, and we end this. Silence thickened. All eyes turned to Clara, her hands clenched in her lap, color draining from her face. You want me to walk out there, to let him see me, knowing he's watching? You won't be alone, Alvarez assured. The second he moves, we shut it down. Clara's breath hitched, panic rising. No, if he even tries, if he comes near me, I can't let Ethan go through that again. Daniel crouched beside her, his voice steady. Clara, I won't let him touch you. Neither will Kyle. This isn't just bait. It's a chance to end this so he never shadows you again. But we need you to trust us. Her eyes brimmed. Trust? You're asking a mother to walk into the open for the man who nearly stole her child. Daniel didn't flinch. He tugged Kyle closer. The shepherd stepped up, amber eyes locked on Clara. Slowly, he lowered his head onto her knee, pressing the weight of himself against her trembling body. You trust him, Daniel said softly, the way Ethan did. Clara's hand sank into Kyle's fur. A sob broke. He saved my son. And he'll save you too, Daniel vowed. But hiding won't stop this man. This is the only way. Tears spilled. Fear tore through her, but resolve flickered beneath. She wanted to end this, for Ethan, for herself. A small voice broke the silence. Mama? Ethan stood in the doorway in pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Seeing her tears, he ran forward, climbing into her lap. Why are you crying? What's happening? He asked, panic edging his voice. Clara kissed his forehead, but he whispered before she could answer. Don't go, Mama. Please, don't leave me again. The room fell silent. Hardened officers looked away, throats tight. Clara wept, holding him close. I don't want to, baby, but they need me to keep you safe. Ethan shook his head, tears pooling. No, he'll hurt you too. Daniel crouched lower, voice gentle. Ethan, Cale and I will be with her. We won't let anything happen. You have my word. The boy's eyes darted to Cale. The shepherd's steady gaze met his, unblinking. Slowly, Ethan pressed his small hand into Cale's fur, clinging. Promise, he whispered. Daniel nodded, his eyes burning. Promise. Clara kissed her son's face, whispering, I love you. This is so you'll never have to be afraid again. Ethan clutched her shirt until Kyle pressed closer. The boy hugged the shepherd's neck, whispering through tears, Okay, but come back, both of you. The trap was set, though no one dared say the word. The morning air was damp, the sidewalks slick with spring rain. Clara walked with her arms folded tight, every step trembling. Kyle paced half a step ahead, leash slack in Daniel's grip, his body taut with energy. Every drip of water, every shuffle of feet registered in the flick of his ears. Clara's breath came shallow. She could still feel Ethan's little hands clutching her shirt. His whispered, Don't go, echoed louder than her own heartbeat. Officers lined the street in plain clothes, leaning on lampposts, sipping coffee, pretending to scroll phones. From half a block back, Daniel scanned windows, alleys, cars, hand near his weapon, Cale steady at his side. They turned down a narrow street. Buildings leaned inward, shadows crowding. Clara's pace quickened, fear tightening her chest. A shape detached from a stairwell. A tall man, gaunt, face carved by a jagged scar. His eyes locked on Clara, hunger burning. In his fist, a crowbar glinted. With a roar, he lunged. Clara froze, her scream splitting the air. Kyle exploded forward before thought could catch up. The shepherd slammed into the man, jaws clamping onto his arm. The crowbar clattered to the pavement. Cale snarled, twisting savagely, blood spraying as the man screamed. Daniel sprinted, weapon drawn. Police! Down! The suspect writhed, clawing at the ground, reaching for the crowbar. His eyes flicked toward Clara. She's mine, he spat. Clara sobbed, stumbling back, terror choking her. Cale! Hold! Daniel barked. The shepherd's jaws locked tighter, growl rising like thunder. Officers swarmed, boots pounded, guns leveled, hands where we can see them. Don't move! Daniel kicked the crowbar out of reach and dropped his weight, forcing the man down. Cuffs snapped shut with metallic finality. Silence fell, broken only by Clara's sobs and Kyle's heavy panting. Her eyes locked on the dog, muzzle streaked red, chest heaving, eyes unblinking. He had intercepted death itself. "You saved me," she whispered through tears. Kyle stood guard, steady, until Daniel pulled him back. For one breath, it felt over. The scarred man bucked violently. From beneath his jacket, a thin blade flashed. Kyle lunged again. The knife sank deep into his side. The shepherd's yelp ripped through the alley, sharp and raw. Blood spilled across concrete. His legs faltered. "No!" Daniel's roar shook the street. He tore the knife free, driving his fist into the suspect's jaw as officers pinned him down. Clara's scream shattered the air. She clutched Ethan against her chest, rocking him as the boy sobbed, "Mama, what's happening?" Kyle staggered, blood pouring from his flank. He tried to stay upright, eyes still blazing, but his body trembled violently. Daniel dropped to his knees, pressing his hands to the wound. "Kyle!" His voice cracked. The shepherd's eyes met his, glazed but steady. No panic, only loyalty. "You held the line," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "You saved us." Clara collapsed against the wall, unable to watch. Ethan peeked through her arms, crying, "Don't let him die." "Please don't let him die." Daniel's hands pressed harder, slick with blood. "Get EMS here now," he bellowed. "They're en route," Alvarez shouted back. Minutes felt like years. KL whimpered weakly, twitching against Daniel's grip. Daniel slid an arm beneath him, lifting him with trembling care. Blood soaked into his uniform. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered fiercely. "You don't quit on me now." Clara rocked Ethan, whispering, "He's strong. He'll make it. He has to." But her eyes locked on the trail of blood, her heart breaking. Ethan screamed again, "Kyle! Don't go!" His voice cracked like glass. The shepherd's ear twitched faintly. His eyes found the boy. Even in pain, he pressed his muzzle weakly against Daniel's arm, as if to say, "Not yet." Daniel's chest shook. He pressed his lips to Cale's ear. "You're not dying on this street. Not while I'm breathing." Officers cleared a path, radios shouting for medics. Sirens wailed closer, lights flashing against the alley walls. Daniel carried Cale forward, each step leaving blood behind, his arms locked around the dog's trembling body. Clara held Ethan tight, her sobs breaking against his hair. The boy's eyes stayed on Kyle, wide and wet, whispering through tears, "Please come back." Daniel's jaw clenched. His vow burned hotter than fear. "Hold on," he whispered again, his voice breaking. "Hold on." The sirens screamed into the street. Medics burst through. Clara wept into her son's hair. Daniel's arms tightened around Kyle. The leader was in custody. The trap had worked. But as Kyle's blood stained Daniel's uniform, one truth settled heavy in every heart. Victory had never felt so fragile. The sterile hallway reeked of antiseptic and fear. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, too bright, too unforgiving. Clara sat rigid in a plastic chair, arms wrapped tight around Ethan, as if the air itself might snatch him away. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from hours of tears. Ethan lay curled against her chest, trembling, his silence heavier than sobs. Daniel Hayes stood apart, back pressed to the wall. His uniform was stiff with Kyle's blood. Dark patches dried across his sleeves. No scrubbing had erased the stains beneath his nails. He hadn't changed. He hadn't moved. His jaw was locked so tight the muscles trembled. eyes fixed on the double doors of surgery. Every sound magnified, the squeak of nurses' shoes, the distant phone at reception. None of it mattered, only the doors. Clara stroked her son's hair, whispering prayers into his curls, sometimes promises, sometimes bargains. Please, God, don't take him. He saved my boy. Don't let him pay like this. Her voice cracked, but she stifled sobs for Ethan's sake. Daniel wanted to say Kyle was strong, that he'd seen him survive worse, but the truth stuck in his throat. He'd carried Kyle into surgery, felt the shallow breaths, the limp weight. For the first time, he had been afraid his partner wouldn't come back. Ethan shifted. His small voice broke the silence. Mama? Clara bent down quickly. Yes, baby? He saved me again, Ethan whispered. Her lips quivered. Tears spilled anew. Yes, sweetheart. He did. He saved us all. Daniel's chest ached at the words. He turned away, jaw tight, fighting the memory of Kyle's yelp when the knife sank into him. A nurse passed with a clipboard. Clara's head snapped up, hope flaring, only to dim at the quiet shake of her head. Still in surgery, Clara folded forward, face pressed into Ethan's hair, whispering broken prayers. At last, Daniel moved, lowering himself beside them. His voice was rough, dragged from deep inside. I should have stopped him sooner. That blade should have never touched Cale. Clara shook her head. Daniel. But he stared at the floor. He took the hit meant for me. Again. His voice cracked. Ethan turned his tearful eyes toward him. It's not your fault, he whispered. Cale wanted to. He always wants to save people. The boy's fragile certainty struck Daniel harder than any reprimand. Clara hugged Ethan tighter, her voice trembling. He's right. Don't carry this as guilt. Carry it as proof of what Cale is. Brave, loyal, strong. He fought for Ethan like he was his own. That's why I believe he'll make it. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding faintly, though the storm inside him refused to quiet. The hallway sank back into silence. Minutes dragged into hours. Every muffled sound from behind the doors lifted their heads, only for hope to collapse again. Finally, Ethan's small voice broke it once more, slurred by drowsiness. He's my hero. Please don't let him die. Clara wept silently, pressing her lips to his crown. He's our hero, Ethan. And heroes don't give up. Daniel clenched his fists tighter. Don't give up, boy. Not now. The doors finally opened. A vet in scrubs stepped out, mask pulled down, gloves faintly streaked with crimson. His eyes found Clara, then Daniel. No one breathed. He made it, the vet said. The wound was deep, but we stopped the bleeding. He lost a lot of blood, but his conditioning carried him through. He's alive. The words shattered the storm. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She doubled over with a sob so raw it echoed down the hallway, tears spilling hot into Ethan's hair. He's alive. Oh God, he's alive. Daniel closed his eyes. His breath left him in a rush, half exhale, half prayer. His shoulders sagged for the first time since the alley, his hands trembling with release. Ethan stirred, blinking. Cale? Clara kissed his forehead, still crying, still smiling through tears. He made it, baby. He's going to be okay. The boy's eyes filled instantly. He's alive? Yes, sweetheart. He's alive. Daniel rose slowly, unsteady on his feet. When can I see him? Soon. The vet nodded. He's sedated but stable. If anyone can fight through this, it's that dog. Clara set Ethan gently on the chair and rose. Her tears streamed, but now, There was light in her face. She turned to Daniel. For a long moment she just looked at him. The blood on his uniform, the exhaustion etched deep. Then, suddenly, she sank to her knees. "Clara," Daniel started, startled. She shook her head, tears dripping onto clasped hands. "Thank you. For carrying him. For believing when I couldn't. You didn't just save Kyle tonight. You saved us." Daniel's throat tightened. He bent, lifting her gently up. His voice was low. "Don't thank me. Thank him. He stood between you and death. I just followed his lead." Clara's lips trembled. She turned her gaze toward the surgery doors, as if she could see Kyle beyond them. Her tears flowed, but now they fell with relief, not despair. The recovery ward was hushed, machines humming soft rhythms. Through the glass, Clara and Daniel stood side by side, watching Kyle lying on a padded mat. His flank was shaved and bandaged, tubes tracing from his body to monitors that beeped in steady time with his stubborn heart. Even sedated, his body curved protectively, head angled toward the door, as if he knew who would come. Ethan clutched his red cap tight to his chest. Can I go in?" Clara brushed his cheek, smiling through exhaustion. "Yes, sweetheart. But gently. He's very tired." A nurse opened the door. Ethan stepped in, shoes squeaking faintly on the floor. Cale's ear twitched at the sound. The boy froze, then tiptoed closer. He knelt at Cale's side, fumbling as he placed the red cap beside the dog's paw. "This is for you," he whispered. "You saved me again, so now you can have my lucky cap." Kyle stirred, blinking heavy eyes. For a moment his amber gaze was clouded. Then it sharpened, finding the boy. A soft whine escaped, not a growl, gentle, almost like a sigh. Ethan reached out, brushing his fingers carefully through Kyle's fur, avoiding the bandages. His voice trembled. "Don't be scared. You're safe now. I'm here." With effort, Kyle lifted his head, slow, strained, but deliberate. His muzzle brushed against Ethan's cheek, followed by a weak, certain lick. Ethan gasped, tears spilling, his arms wrapped gently around Kyle's neck. "I love you," he whispered. "You're my hero." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed freely, but they were tears of gratitude now. "Thank you, God. Thank you." Daniel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, throat burning. He didn't look away. Kyle, weak yet still giving comfort, was a reminder of why he wore the badge, why he had chosen this life with the shepherd. Inside, Ethan brushed Kyle's muzzle once more. "Rest now," he said softly. "I'll keep watch this time." Kyle's eyes softened. His head lowered back onto the mat, breath slow and even. His gaze never left the boy until his eyelids finally slipped shut. Ethan sat beside him, hand resting on Kyle's paw, the red cap lying like an offering of devotion. His small frame relaxed for the first time since the ordeal, his trust placed fully in the shepherd. Clara entered quietly, kneeling at their side. She stroked Kyle's fur, bent her head to kiss Ethan's hair. "We're all here, and we're not going anywhere." Daniel lingered in the doorway. The moment belonged to them, mother, child, and dog. But in his heart, he knew the truth. They weren't three separate lives anymore. They were one circle, held together by the sacrifice of a shepherd who refused to yield. And in that small recovery room, beneath the hum of machines and the scent of antiseptic, hope returned. For the first time since the nightmare began, it felt real. By the time Kyle was strong enough to stand, his story had already traveled far beyond Riverside. News anchors told it with reverence, voices softening over the footage. A German shepherd, bloodied but unyielding, lunging to protect a mother and child. Headlines called him the dog who saved Riverside. Letters poured into the precinct, crayon drawings, handwritten prayers, treats tucked into envelopes. One elderly woman wrote in shaky cursive, "I lost my son in the war. He had a dog he loved more than life. Your Kyle reminded me of him. Thank you for giving us hope again." And so a ceremony was planned, not by officials, but by the people. Riverside Park, once filled with terror, would now become the place where courage was remembered. The morning bloomed with color. Children carried handmade posters, "Thank you, Kyle," and floppy-eared drawings that seemed to wag right off the page. Parents brought flowers, laying them at the foot of the gazebo until its steps looked like a garden of gratitude. Clara stood at the edge with Ethan at her side. The boy wore his red cap proudly, the same one he had laid by Kyle's paw in the recovery room. His small hand clutched hers, his eyes darting eagerly across the crowd. Then a ripple passed through the people. Heads turned, cameras lifted, children rose on tiptoe. Daniel Hayes appeared in full uniform, his expression steady, his step measured. Beside him walked Kyle. The shepherd moved with deliberate grace, his gait slower, but proud. A scar traced his flank where the knife had pierced him, but it only deepened the sense of a soldier returned. His ears flicked at the noise, his amber eyes calm, his tail sweeping once in quiet rhythm. The applause began soft, then swelled like thunder, rolling across the park until even the trees seemed to vibrate. Children shouted his name. Parents clapped through tears. Strangers pressed hands to their hearts. Kyle did not falter. He walked at Daniel's side with head high, amber eyes scanning faces. For a moment, the ovation was not for a dog, but for something greater. Loyalty itself, courage embodied. Children stepped forward with drawings. A girl of 8 held out a folded paper flower. Kyle lowered his head, sniffing gently before brushing it with his muzzle. The girl gasped, tears spilling as if she had touched something holy. Clara's throat closed. She looked down at Ethan. His chest swelled with pride. "That's him, Mama," he whispered. "That's my hero." She kissed his hair. "Yes, baby. Ours too." Daniel and Kale mounted the gazebo steps. Flowers blanketed the floor. Cameras flashed, but no lens could capture the weight in the air. Kyle sat at Daniel's side, chest heaving with calm dignity, eyes scanning the crowd. Then the microphone was offered to Clara. For a moment, she froze. Ethan's small hand squeezed hers. She looked at him, then at Kyle, scarred but proud, and stepped forward. Her knees trembled as she gripped the podium. Her first words broke. "Because of Kyle, I hold my son tonight." The crowd hushed. Tears brimmed in her eyes. There are no medals, no ceremonies, that could equal that gift. He didn't just save Ethan, he saved me. In those moments when I thought my child was gone, my world ended. And then, Kyle gave it back. Her voice cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, then drew a shuddering breath. I don't stand here as someone who read his story in the paper. I stand as a mother who saw it, who watched him throw his body between a weapon and my child, who heard his cry when he was hurt, and prayed with everything in me that it wouldn't be his last. Her words faltered. She bent her head toward Ethan. He tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Tell them he's my hero too." Clara's lips trembled. She kissed his forehead, then straightened. Ethan calls him his hero. And I think that's the truest word there is. Heroes aren't only found in uniforms or medals. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs. Sometimes they don't ask for anything except a touch of your hand or a place by your side. And yet, they give everything. She turned, her eyes meeting Kael's steady amber gaze. "Kael, you gave me my son back. And no matter how many lifetimes I live, I will never forget." The crowd erupted. Applause thundered, cheers rose, posters waved, tears spilled. But Clara was already moving, stepping down from the podium. She knelt beside Kael, her arms wrapping around his neck, her tears soaked into his fur. "Thank you," she whispered again and again. Kael leaned into her, his muzzle pressing against her shoulder, his tail sweeping the wood in a slow, deliberate arc. Ethan darted forward, arms wrapping around Kael's other side. For a moment, the 3 of them knelt together, mother, child, and dog, a living picture of what had been saved. The ceremony wound down. Parents gathered their children. Flowers glowed in the evening light. But one last moment remained. Ethan tugged his mother's hand. She bent. "Do you want to say goodbye?" He nodded. The crowd seemed to part instinctively as he walked toward Kael. Small knees bent on the stage, eyes wide with reverence. Kael tilted his head, ears forward, gaze softening. Ethan reached out and placed his palm against the shepherd's muzzle. The park fell hushed. Ethan leaned close, whispering where only Kael could hear, "You're my hero." Kael blinked slowly, then wagged his tail once. He pressed his head into the boy's small shoulder, the weight both grounding and tender. Ethan's arms wrapped carefully around his neck. His voice trembled. "Don't leave me, okay? Not ever." Kael exhaled a low sigh, then licked the boy's cheek, a gentle stroke of tongue filled with all the words he could never say. Ethan giggled through tears, his small body shaking with both joy and relief. From the crowd, Clara pressed a hand to her mouth. Daniel's eyes burned as he watched, soldier, officer, partner, knowing he was witnessing the kind of courage that outlives war. On the stage, the boy and the dog stayed pressed together, one holding on, the other refusing to let go. The applause rose once more, echoing through Riverside Park. Children chanted Kael's name. Flowers brightened in the fading sun. But the image that lingered was simple. A boy with his cheek pressed to the scarred shepherd's fur, whispering a vow through tears, and a dog who answered with a lick, sealing a bond stronger than fear. And so Riverside remembered its hero, not just in headlines or ceremonies, but in the quiet heartbeat of devotion, the dog who saved Riverside. Kael. The crowd, though respectful, could not hide their emotion. Many wept openly, others clapped softly, a ripple of tenderness that spread like wind through grass. The image of the boy and the shepherd would linger in their hearts long after the day ended. Ethan finally pulled back, though his hand never left Kael's fur. He looked into the dog's eyes and whispered one last promise, his voice steady now. "I'll always love you." Kael's tail swept the ground again, his eyes half closing as he leaned into the touch, as though content to let the boy carry the last word. The sun dipped lower, casting the park in a golden glow. Shadows stretched long. painting the playground and the trees in soft hues of orange and crimson. The same swings that had once swayed in chaos now moved gently with the evening breeze, laughter returning as children climbed them again. Life, fragile but resilient, had returned to Riverside Park. And yet, a shadow lingered, not of fear, but of remembrance. Of one moment when tragedy had nearly claimed everything, and of one dog who refused to let it. As the crowd began to disperse, Daniel gave Kyle's leash a light tug. The shepherd rose, steady but slower, his scar catching the last rays of sun. Ethan stood too, slipping his hand back into his mother's. Together, they walked off the stage, mother, child, officer, and dog. The applause followed them once more, but softer this time, like the fading notes of a hymn. Behind them, the sky deepened into the colors of twilight. The laughter of children rang across the park again, bright and unbroken, carried by the wind. And in the midst of it, Kyle's silhouette stood tall against the sunset, the memory of his courage etched forever in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. For Ethan, though, it was simpler than all that. He looked at the shepherd walking proudly beside him, and he knew the truth in the simplest, truest words he could ever say. "You're my hero." Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear uniforms or medals. They walk beside us on four paws, with steady eyes and hearts that never waver. Stories like Kyle's remind us just how deep a dog's loyalty runs, and how much healing, courage, and love they quietly bring into our lives. A German shepherd doesn't need words to say, "I'll protect you." They live it every day. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that unspoken bond, you know it's something sacred. And if you'd like to deepen that connection, I recently came across a resource that touched me. It offers thoughtful ways to strengthen the relationship between people and their dogs. You might find it meaningful too. Take your time. Explore if you feel called. Think of it not as advice from a stranger, but a gentle nudge from a friend who knows how much these animals mean to us. Because in the end, the real miracle is not just what they do for us. It's who they are to us.